Hey, folks, welcome back to Ken Michaels Radio, where we talk about the Beatles on all of our shows. And we always have fantastic guests that we welcome on. So, this time out, a very special guy who I went to college with many, many years ago. We both went to the New York Institute of Technology in Old Westbury, Long Island. We both were a part of the radio station WNYT. And when I first started doing my Beatles show in March of 1982, I first started going solo doing it, and then I had a co-host for a year, Ed Ryan, who's been a guest here on this channel. And after he left, then I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue doing any more work on the Beatles all by myself. I was very comfortable having a co-host. So I had a couple of my friends from the college radio station co-host the show with me. And that's where our guest today comes in. He was there for a couple of shows. I always knew him as being a big Beatle fan at the station. And he's had a career as a stand-up comedian, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But he's here to do a number 9 dream show with us. Let's welcome Al Romas to our channel.
How you doing, Ken? And by the way, I still have a cassette with our couple of our radio shows on them, a couple of
I
Beatles
would love to
shows.
hear it because I don't think I have much from my year and a half on the college radio station with my Beatles show. You'll
If
have
I
to.
could figure out a way to copy it, I will get it to you. There's games on it, and there's Back to the Egg, I think, is a game that was called that, and there's a few things. I've listened to it fairly recently, and yeah, it's pretty good. It's fun. And then I hosted one. You were the co-host. You let me host a show, and that was the one I recorded.
Boy, I don't remember
So
that part.
yeah, yeah.
I had a lot of games as I
Hmm.
continue doing on my website and in my syndicated radio show for Every Little Thing. But those were good times. But it was
Hmm.
41 years ago when we were on WNYT.
That's right.
Westbury.
Rocking the Island.
That's right.
Cable TV. We were the background station for, I think it was What's On, the guide channel
Yeah,
on the
and for like a
TV.
swap and shop kind of thing.
Right, right. Yeah.
It was incredible because, well, we also had a big radius of like a mile around the college
Yeah.
campus. But
Hmm.
most of our listeners came from cable television, and the
Yep.
audio wasn't that great. But we
Right.
found an audience because we had unique programming, like a lot of
Hmm.
stations do.
Yeah.
And
Amazing.
that's where my Beatles show started. And I remember you being there on the other side of the window, in the
Yeah.
newsroom. But yeah, you
Yeah,
had,
that show that I hosted, I was in the booth and you were in the newsroom. And I remember because you were like, you have to come up with the games. You have to create your own games.
I
So I
first
have them. I have my own version of what you were doing. I just kind of copied it, made my own. But I remember you being like, you got to have your own games. I was like, gosh, all right. Like, get some games, but it was great. Yeah.
I have
I'll,
to hear that.
yeah. I'll get it to you some way, somehow.
I got to ask you one question. Has my voice improved at all in the last 41 years? Or do I
You
sound the
sound, you sound the same. I mean, you do. You sound the same, which is a good thing for people who, we talk for a living for all these years.
uh-huh.
And to keep the voice. And but yeah, you sound exactly the same. That's when I found you on YouTube and started watching your shows. I was like, oh, there's Ken. He looks the same. He sounds the same. It was good.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're watching.
I'm watching. I've been watching.
Al also has a podcast show that we'll talk about as well. But as I said, he has chosen to do a number 9 dream show on John Lennon. And when we do a number 9 dream show, I pick 3 categories for which my guest, Al, here will pick his top 3 in each category. Now, for the show this time, I've picked top 3 either overlooked or underrated solo Lennon songs. Then we also have top 3 Lennon Beatles songs. They have to be songs that John either wrote all of it or is the primary writer. Okay. And top 3 songs that John covered either in the Beatles or his solo career. So solo meaning like the rock and roll album, for example.
Hmm.
So why don't we start with your top 3 overlooked or underrated solo Lennon songs? Now, I didn't say these have to be in order here. These are just 3.
Okay.
Okay.
Just 3. Yeah. And like I was saying to you before we started, there's so many songs that for me, these things change all the time. But once I figured I'm doing the show, I want to pick the songs. And I started thinking, and I would go my first one, overlooked, overrated, underrated, from Walls and Bridges. I go Old Dirt Road,
Okay.
which a song I've always loved. I don't know really what it's about. I don't really get it. I mean, it's kind of cool. And, I think John called it rubbish, but, that's what he would do. He calls everything rubbish. And who knows? If he was around today, he might say it was the greatest song he ever wrote. You never know with the way he went
That's
with his music. But yeah, Old Dirt Road. I think Harry Nilsson co-wrote it, and
true.
uh, it's a great song. I don't think a lot of people, maybe the real fans, know it, but I think it's definitely an underrated uh, solo Lennon song.
Yeah. I know that Harry wrote one of the lines in particular, trying to shovel smoke with the pitchfork in the wind. That came from Harry Nilsson. But I don't know what
Okay,
else he contributed.
yeah, that's a great line. And one of those lines again. I love that. I don't know what it is. I don't know
Uh-huh.
what it means, but it's cool. And but a lot of Walls and Bridges. I think that's just another. I think as an album, it's rated in the
I
sense
think,
of
yeah.
what
My
people think of Lennon.
yeah. I've always
You
said
know.
My Games and Walls and Bridges are two very underrated albums, and I'm glad to see the box set coming out in July for Mind Games. But
Hmm.
hopefully, and I don't know if you've listened to any of the stuff that's already on YouTube that they've leaked out
Yeah,
from. Sounds
yeah.
fantastic.
Oh, it's incredible, and that I mean, I would say right in now in this time frame, I think Mind Games is probably my favorite Lennon album. I mean, probably.
Why would you say that?
Um, just when because I've gone back and listened to it, and it's just like a lot of the songs that I've kind of forgotten or didn't think about for a while. They're just popping for me, and I'm like, that this album as an album is, I mean, it's a pretty solid album. It's really a good album. So I think for me right now, if someone, gun to my head, what's your favorite John Lennon album? I think I go Mind Games today.
Yeah,
And the box set is perfect. I mean, you can't wait to hear the rest of this stuff. But what I've heard so far is it's pretty amazing.
yeah.
So yeah,
Do you like, by the way, listening to, well, the Lennon box sets, they've done an extraordinary job because they have some isolated tracks, they have elements mixes where you're just going to hear, like I heard One Day at a Time. They had just the bass and the keyboards, I
yeah,
think. And it's just by itself. It's beautiful.
I know. Yeah, yeah, I've heard that stuff. It's amazing.
It makes you
Yeah.
appreciate these songs more when you realize what gets put into it when it's broken down
Mm-hmm.
like that.
100%. Yeah. So yeah, that would be my first one, I guess, Old Dirt Road. And then I went to the Imagine album,
Mm,
and I'm going, I don't know if it's underrated, but I think more people shouldn't really know about it, is Crippled Inside,
okay.
which is
That's a
just
fun
a great song. And is that Nicky Hopkins on the piano? And I mean, it's incredible,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, John always had, just like, you know, all the solo Beatles, they all had great musicians working with them. Nicky Hopkins in particular was one of those people that had just the right touch for everything and knew exactly what to play, never overdoing it. But yeah, Crippled Inside, John called a country and western song, and it fit him naturally. A
Hmm. Hmm.
little bit
And
of
I
his.
think of, had he lived in, I just picture that in, if he's touring in a concert,
Hmm.
how cool would that song be? Him at the piano, if he was playing piano, say, or just the whole vibe of that song live would be that would have been amazing. So that's a big one for me, Crippled Inside. And when you say those musicians, you always had good musicians. That's why I'm not a fan, personally, I'm not a fan of what do you call it? The Plastic Ono band, the back, what was the, I'm blanking here, the the band that he had for live.
Yeah, Klaus Form.
Elephant's Memory. Elephant's Memory.
Oh, Elephant's Memory. Okay.
Yeah.
You
I
like that?
mean, no. And I always felt like he was slumming in a way with them. And here's John Lennon and I felt like it was a bar band backing him up. You know, a New York City bar band. It was like this doesn't
Yeah,
work.
well, to some people they had that reputation, but if you talk to the bass player Gary Van Syck, he'll tell you the backgrounds of each of them, and they've all worked with a lot of different people and did studio work too. So it's not strictly, I know they had that vibe to them, but that's probably what John was looking for at the time.
I guess, yeah. And but it just when I see them and backing him, it just always rubbed me. I was like, no, you don't get to back John Lennon. This is wrong. But at that time it fit, you know, where he was living, what they were, how they were going about things. I get it.
Right,
But I just look at it like, no, this is like, you know, if he was going to tour in 1980
right.
or 81, it wasn't going to be Elephant's Memory backing him. Do you know what I mean? It was going to be real Earl Sick and whoever, you know, I mean, some real
Right.
musicians.
Those were
But
fantastic musicians too. But when you take
yeah,
a look since Paul had his own band, but John, George, and Ringo would use Klaus Foreman and Jim Keltner and Nicky Hopkins and Alan White and all these great people that knew exactly what to play for him and really fit,
yeah.
working with them. So Billy Preston, you name it.
Isn't it amazing how Klaus Vorman is a guy in Hamburg walking in to see the band
Yeah.
and then ends up being Klaus Vorman, this
Yes.
incredible musician. It's just kind of an amazing thing, you know, when he just wanders in one night.
And from that, he goes to be in Manfred Mann,
Mm-hmm.
playing the bass and then, you know, keeping friends with the Beatles. And he winds up working with them in their solo careers and doing all the artwork that he did.
It's yeah, it's quite a, and he's still around, which is great, you know, and it's amazing. He's one of those guys. You just that's one of those guys. I don't know if you ever spoke to him. That's a guy like I would love to
Oh, I
talk
haven't,
with
but
him.
I want to. And he's
Yeah.
so respectful of that time and everything that he says is just in the best of taste. You know,
Yeah.
there aren't many people left that have that history.
No. And you think of the book, I mean, if he wanted to, he could write bestsellers about and retell, you know, some stories, but he
Right.
keeps it like what's her Jane Asher
Jane Asher.
never wrote, never talks about it. She was there for a lot of stuff.
There's a lot of classy people still in the Beatle
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
That's not that common in the rock world.
Exactly. Exactly.
The
Yeah. Yeah.
self-publishers want is the dirt.
hmm And she, you know, she was there for a lot of stuff, and as Klaus was, and they keep it quiet, and it's great, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because you don't need. I mean, really, there's enough out there that's made up, or you know, who
Right.
knows? Some of these books that come out, they're just appearing these books, and you go, come on, no, no, you know.
Anybody who's been with the Beatles for a week can have a book out.
Yeah, and I'm waiting for Lewison's next book, but
We're all
where is
waiting.
that? Where is that? Come on, Mark,
I
please.
I think Alan Kozin and Adrian Sinclair will finish their McCartney series before Mark Lewison finishes his.
Yeah, I well, what year is he on? He was saying 10 years. He's that's got to that book, the first one, it's got to be about 8 years now, right? Seven, eight, nine.
The first book took you from the end of the Beatles through the end of '73 when Band on the Run came out. And the new book
Right.
in December will be picking up from there through the end of the '70s, probably up until the drug bust in Japan.
Okay. Okay.
So
Wow.
I just
Yeah,
don't
I
know how
just
many volumes there's going to be.
seemingly endless. I mean, that the drug buzz only goes, what is that? 1980?
Yeah,
Or
January.
so you got another 44 years to write about. It's, you
Yeah,
know, it's incredible.
it's still it's a different scenario, especially once you're getting into the '90s because you're getting less studio work from Paul, less pop albums anyway, more classical once the '90s kick in. Um, but there's more to talk about, especially in the 2000s with the touring. And I don't know, you know, how interested the fans are going to be about one tour after another when many of them are so similar. But, the
Yeah.
70s was a very productive period in terms of albums. So was the 80s.
hmm
90s less, but you substitute the classical instead of,
Right.
so that's where it
Right.
comes in. So I wonder how much, especially with Alan Kozin being a classical expert, he worked in the New York Times in their classical department. He was their Beatles guy there. Um,
Oh, okay.
so what he has to say about the classical music will be very interesting from his.
Yeah. What's your take on Paul still touring and as he's, going to South America? And are you like great or are you kind of like, it's,
Well, you got to
is it
realize I'm super spoiled. I've seen Paul probably 30 times in concert. I know people who have seen him much more than that. There
right?
are people all over the world that have never seen him or only seen him once. Like he just last year went to Australia for the first time since the, I think, early 90s.
Mhm.
There are places in the world where he's hardly toured, and I'm happy for the fans to finally get to see him, but he hasn't changed his set list that much in the last 20
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
Um, in fact, on the Got Back tour, on a few shows in the very beginning, he played Women and Wives from McCartney 3, and that was it.
Oh,
Otherwise, he doesn't do a thing from McCartney 3.
yeah. You're right. You're right.
I wish that he would do more solo music. I
Hmm.
realize that there'll always be people out there who can never get enough Beatles. You got to play some Beatles, but I think it's 60% Beatles, 40% solo, and I think that's too much, especially
I
towards the
agree.
end of the show.
And he's got so many wings hits, or that really, let's put those in. But I've seen him not. I haven't seen him 30 times, but yeah, it is the same show basically. Whatever, and the same. Again, the other thing too. I wish he would even if you have to hire someone like Barry Manilow, a friend of mine, writes for him, and he writes jokes and patter,
Uh-huh.
and so he could say something current about the news or a little something, and there's a joke involved, and it just because those fans come back and come back and come back. But with Paul, it's the same stories,
Right.
word for word, or even the let me drink this in a little bit. It's like, dude, come on, change the wording of it at least. Let me enjoy this. And that's it. But he says it word for word. And I get it though. I understand it's a show, and he's comfortable doing it that way, and it's fine. But as a person going back and back, you go, okay, this is the Hendrix story. That kind of
He treats it like it's like a Broadway show, and you've got the same
right,
script every single time.
right, yeah.
So
It's a show,
on the one hand, I feel like who are we to be critical after all he's given us at this point? And I'm grateful that he's doing anything for the fans because he's about to turn 82. Every
hmm
single day he has is precious. If I was 82, I'd be trying to spend it with my family just about every single day. And he does spend time
yeah,
with his family, but he does give a lot of time to the fans. I
yeah.
personally would rather we have as many albums from him of new material than having tour after tour after tour with the same songs. That's me, but I realize I'm not all these other people who would kill to see him just once before the
I
inevitable happens.
Yeah, for them, I get it. I get, and I'm the same way though. I wish he would. I wish there would be more albums coming out and solo things, instead of the touring. But you have a good point. There are people who haven't seen him.
Mm. Whenever
You
it
know,
concerns an artist whose catalog I like thoroughly, like almost every single song, like Billy Joel is the perfect example. I like From Piano Man on just about every song on
hmm
his albums. But I'm the last person that wants to see him in concert because it's the
hmm
greatest. I live for the album cuts that you don't hear
right,
as much. Like I know he's done Vienna,
uh huh,
stuff like that. I live for that. I would be bored with the greatest hit show.
right,
If it was an
right,
artist
yeah,
who I didn't follow closely, who I basically knew the hits, I'd be happy, you know.
hmm
But so,
yeah. No, I understand. I get it. I get it. Um,
so
okay,
what's
let
the
me see.
third song?
Well, the third one, I go with Now and Then.
Okay, so
Uh,
you're counting that as a solo Lennon song instead of
oh
Beatles.
no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I have my
You
list
messed it up there,
here.
Al.
I messed up my list. Sorry. Now and Then will be coming up later.
Okay.
Uh, number one, but the third one is Out the Blue.
Oh,
So for Mind Games,
right.
and always a favorite of mine, but it has a lot of meaning to me because during COVID, I
Mm,
was out of work. I
right.
mean, literally out of work. I was out of work for a year and a half. Um, and then I got separated and I ended up getting divorced
Oh,
during COVID, and I'm out of work. And so I move out of my house into an apartment, and I have all these boxes everywhere. And my life is like, it's the lowest it's ever been.
yeah.
And my job requires a room of people exchanging oxygen. You know what I mean? It felt
Right.
like we're never going back. I mean, so during that whole thing, I ended up meeting my girlfriend now.
Right.
And it was so random and crazy, the story, that in my head, it was out the blue. How did I meet you? It was out the blue.
Right.
And then that song kept hitting me. And now it's become like our song. But it's like that song literally sings to what happened. She like literally saved me and made my life, you know, good again. And it was all out the blue. So that one has a lot of meaning, and I enjoyed it before that, as a
Yeah.
song. So
Just the opening lines. Out the blue you came to me and blew away life's misery.
100%. That was it. That was right there, right in front of me. And I remember letting her hear it, and she was just like, "What?" Because she's a fan, but that kind of level of not really crazy like us.
Uh-huh.
And she'd never heard it, and she was just like, "Oh my god, these lyrics!" It's like, yeah, it's pretty close, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of people are discovering that song more and more. And I think when there was a collection that came out called Working Class Hero. It was a double CD, and it was not just the hits, but they were able to put album cuts on there. And Out the Blue was one of them. And I was so happy to see, wow, that was recognized on this collection. More people are going
Right.
to discover it. So I think, in the podcast shows that I do, a lot of people are pointing to that song. I think it's one of his
Oh, good.
greatest ballads.
Oh, good. Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful song. And, when you get a song that really connects to you like that, or something, it really was like, this song is like my song. This fits everything here. And
Mhm.
then I ended up going back to work and things are good again. So it really and that song's always in my head about anything I think about those days, and it's all
Right.
out the blue, so definitely
Okay.
underrated, but should be well known.
Okay. Well, maybe with more shows like this and other podcasts, it will be better known.
Exactly.
Um, okay. So now, do you want to do the Lennon Beatles songs or would you rather do the covers? I
Let's
think we'll
do
save
the
the Lennon Beatles songs for last.
okay.
Okay.
Um,
The songs that John covered either in the Beatles or his solo career. So with John on lead vocals, you know.
okay. These are interesting. This first one. I'm going from sometime in New York City. Baby, please don't go
Wow.
with
Very
Zappa.
cool. Uh-huh.
Uh, I love it. Always did. He sounds great.
Mhm.
They're rocking. He says in the beginning, like we used to play this in the cavern,
Right.
which I've never heard. I mean, not heard, but I've never read or anything. Or you see set lists, and like I've
Right.
never seen that. I never saw that the Beatles played well at the cavern.
If I
But
had Mark Lewison's book, The Beatles Live, which lists all the songs that they did year by year, even from
mhm,
seven on, I would look that up right now, but it's in another room.
okay. But yeah, I just don't, you know what I mean? Because we've read so much, you just know the songs.
Right.
So if you said, "Well, did they play whatever some other guy?" You go, "Of course."
Yeah.
But I don't remember ever. I would love to hear, a version of that because this one's kind of heavy, and I'd love to hear what the Beatles were doing in '62 or something with Well. But great song. I know he and Zappa Zappa has issues with him or had issues with him
Mhm.
over that album. They had a second
One of
album
the
on.
songs which he claimed was Zappa's song, whatever, and they only put part of it on Sometime in New York City. They didn't put the whole thing on there, and Zappa did on one of his albums, but it was a different
Oh,
title. I can't remember.
okay.
off the top of my
Yeah,
head.
I saw something with Zappa, and it was something like it was that, and then he was saying he was pissed too because Lennon, it said Lennon Ono on a
Right.
Zappa song, and that, but
Mm.
again, I don't remember the song, but that's well, baby, please don't go is a choice there, and the second one I go from live at the BBC, a shot of rhythm and blues,
Very nice.
which great vocal. I mean, sounds fantastic.
Mhm.
Love the version of it. I wish they'd put it on, you know, one of the Please Please Me or one of the albums early.
When they had so many songs in the bag that they could have dished out early on, but they also wanted to get their originals in there. So
Yeah.
gradually they had to phase out the covers. It's kind of miraculous in a way that A Hard Day's Night was all originals, stuck in the
That
middle, you know?
it's crazy, really, when you think of it, and they're touring, they're making the movie, and they have an album. Now here's all the originals, you know. But I mean, I wish, you could go, give me a shot of rhythm and blues, take off whatever, Anna, maybe Baines,
Take off Anna.
well, you know what I mean? Just let's give us this one. But it's available. It's on live at the BBC.
Yeah.
And it's, it rocks. It's fun. He sounds great. That was a favorite for a long time.
Yeah, you hear so many of those songs and it's like, why didn't they do this for EMI? Especially,
Hmm.
tell you through the years, probably the most requested of the BBC songs for me from my audience has been Soldier of Love.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know why the Beatles didn't choose to do that one. So,
Yeah. Yeah. There's a few. I mean, McCartney. I mean, if I was doing a Paul one, I would have done Carol. I love that version.
uh-huh,
Those things, they're great. They're great. But luckily, they're available.
right.
People just got to find them. But then the third one cover, I went with Bad Boy, which again, I mean, that's just a great song, great cover. Sounds almost live when they do it.
Uh-huh.
He's got a lot of screaming and those things, which I love. Love that early Beatle energy when you hear it and they're yelling in the background, or you can, that one had really should have been a live song. I would think, like, you could really see that at
That's
their
true.
early concerts.
Yeah, that has
That'd been
been,
fun.
along with rock and roll music, to me, my favorite John covers from the Beatle years. Because rock and roll music has so much energy to it and everything.
Hmm.
But Bad Boy is a favorite. It's just, the now Junior, behave yourself.
It's great.
It's
Yeah,
just so
yeah.
typical rock and roll teenager. What are you doing in your room?
Hmm. Hmm.
Bad at school, whatever. All that stuff.
Yeah.
You,
And I always remember when I was young, I didn't have the lyrics, and I used to think he's saying, "You gave the cocker spaniel a bath in mother's laundromat." And I was
uh-huh,
like, I always thought, like, what is a laundry bathtub? Like, how does that work?
uh-huh,
And then you see the lyrics, and it's like, he stole a bag of mother's laundromat of her laundry.
uh-huh.
Okay, but yeah, it's great, and would have loved to have seen it or live. I don't think there's any. I've looked on YouTube. I don't think there's any
They never
any
did it live.
video. No, no,
No.
yeah,
And their
yeah,
concerts, once they became big, those 25-minute, 30-minute, what are you going to cram it with? You got to put a lot of the originals in there, you know.
yeah,
And I guess,
yeah.
they love Twist and Shout so much that they started their concerts with that, and a
Uh
bridge
huh.
version too.
Yeah,
But and rock and roll
yeah.
music they
But
started with.
that's been one of the cool things too about YouTube is because we've had these bootlegs forever, albums, and then to see now the video from, like, the Budokan concert where I heard it forever,
Uh-huh.
and then to now to see it, it's pretty cool. Uh, just seems like we were talking before. Everything's available now. I mean, if you're a Beatle fan, and today you got it made. When we were Beatle fan back in the '80s and '70s, it was tough sledding there. There was a book or two, and it wasn't much.
Well,
You know.
when I lived on Long Island, I had friends that collected all kinds of bootleg video from Europe, and
Hmm.
we waited till my friends got it and we watched a lot of this stuff that you're now seeing on YouTube. But it's true. I mean, Beatle fans are spoiled.
Oh yeah.
Makes me think, why doesn't Apple put out all this stuff and they can make some money off of it instead of all these people who can record it off of YouTube?
I don't know what they're waiting for. I mean, they have this, let's go release it. Let's see it,
Yeah.
Shea Stadium or there's a million things that could be out there. Um, I don't know. I don't understand the reasoning, at this point we're in 2024.
When Apple decides to put out all this stuff, if they do, it'll be better quality than what's on YouTube,
Yeah.
making fans wild.
Yeah.
But it's changed the whole ball game having YouTube and
Hmm.
so much stuff on there. There's so many things that people do. People have their own audio software now where they're isolating tracks themselves and they're
I
making better
know.
quality recordings, or they're taking demos of songs and they're adding their own instrumentation to Beatles songs. And there's so many things that you can do, and there are fans out there that like all this stuff. You
Yeah,
know,
I don't like it. But it's the way it is. I don't like I go on YouTube, I don't want to see or hear an AI
yeah.
version of a new Beatles song. It's like, no, I don't want to hear that. But then you look and there's, 8 million views or something. So
Hmm.
people are interested,
If you can with the audio software isolate all the tracks and make a better mix or a clearer mix, but keep it just the Beatles' own instrumentation and nothing else,
Hmm.
I don't see. Well, I don't mind that,
Hmm.
but at the
Yeah,
same
as long
time,
as you're not adding to it. I don't want to, don't change anything and add to it
yeah,
what you think, oh, this drum should have sounded like this.
right,
No, not that. But clean stuff up or, you know, I love when they'll drop and just give you the vocals, or just the harmonies,
yeah,
I mean, it's like, oh, the Beatles singing because with no
right.
music behind. Oh, that's great. I'll listen to that.
Just the vocals, you
That's
mean?
fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Put that on the anthology.
amazing.
Yeah, and like I just heard "If I Fell." Oh no, it was Nowhere Man. And it was just John and his vocals playing guitar from the Beatles recording. No other Beatles. And it sounds great. And it's like you never
Wow.
heard it like this before, and you know it's from the Beatles recording.
Right.
But it has a whole different feel to it when it's just John and the guitar.
Yeah.
So these songs could have a different afterlife this way.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, they will live on and forever, and new versions of it. People will do things, and that's great. I guess it's good as long as it keeps it going. And I know people who are very conservative type Beatle fans, and
right.
I mean, they don't want anything touched. They don't do anything. I don't want any that. I have
Well,
a friend
part
who's
of
not even
me,
a fan of YouTube. He's like, it's too much. It's too
hmm,
much. I'm
when it
like, all
comes to those
right.
things, there is part of me, like I said, that's a purist because obviously, I know that the Lennon estate and Harrison's estate would only act in the best interests of John and George, but without John and George here to approve all the different remixes, part of me feels like, how do you know how they would feel about this? Not only
Right.
with the Beatles stuff, but with their solo music.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, John
Yeah.
was so sensitive about his own vocals, and Yoko has liked to put out stuff where John's voice is raw.
Hmm.
I love it, and a lot
Yeah.
of
Me
fans
too.
love it, but how do you know how John would have felt?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We don't. We have no idea. He did. I mean, I was reading or saw something where a while back George Martin was saying how he had dinner with him, and Len was like, "I'd like to re-record everything."
Yeah.
And he goes, "Well, we did some things right, right?" He goes, "No, it's all rubbish." Like, really? He
That's
goes,
what they did
"Everything,
that day.
everything, John, Strawberry Fields is rubbish." He's like, "Yeah, we could do it better." But
Yeah.
I think in his mind too, he's looking at like equipment in 1960, 1966.
Uh-huh.
So if you do it today, back in whatever that was, 78, 70, he's probably thinking, yeah, it would sound better. You know what I mean? I don't think he's not keeping that idea of how great it was. It was just like, well, we could do it better,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah. Well, the Beatles stretched the limitations of what they had back then
Yeah.
to the fullest.
Yeah.
So, all right. So why don't we do your top three Lennon Beatles songs?
All right. and again, these change. But this is currently what I'm sort of listening to or thinking. My favorites right now would be one from the White Album, "Cry Baby Cry."
Interesting. Why that one?
Yeah, I don't know. It's such a weird song. I like songs that tell a story, and it's a story I don't understand. Again, I don't know who it's about. It's about him and Yoko. It's about some fictitious king and queen, and
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I'm not really what's going on there, but I love it musically. Lyrics are fun. I like that McCartney ending with the "Can you take me back?" It's just weird enough to be like, "What's that on that for?" So it's one of those songs where I haven't heard it in a while. Then I remember it popping up a couple of weeks ago, and I was just like, "Man, I love this song." So when you told me the categories, I thought, "Yeah, that's a good one." "Cry Baby Cry."
Yeah, I don't think most people would put that in there, but that's what I like about doing this. I want to hear different opinions. But I did read that when John wrote that, he was using the children's poem with, is it called Sick a Pack of Sixpence? Something, you know.
Okay,
Yeah, but
but
he borrowed words from that. Uh,
right,
and also in Cleanup Time, he kind of does that too. Talks about the king and the queen in
you're
there.
right. Yeah, yeah, you're right. Interesting. Huh. Yeah, he definitely lifted some, he had no problem lifting some lines or some words if he liked them, or that's a sentence from a song. I'll take that. And no issue doing that, where like in comedy, that's the worst thing, the worst offense you can do is
Uh,
any kind of theft or stealing a line or a word that
right,
someone does. But musically, he had no problem with it, and admitted to it all the time. Was saying,
right.
"I take a little of this, I take a little of that," and you know. Um, Also on the list, top three right now: "Ballad of John and Yoko."
Okay.
Again, a story type of thing, and just always, it's one of I was thinking in my head like, it's one of those songs when if it comes on the radio, I'm just, I'm happy, I'm singing along with it. I'm like, this song's great, just a great song, and it's good for young Beatle fans. You listen to it and go, "Who's Peter Brown?" You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and you learn, then you go, "Oh, let me check it out. Who is this guy?" And so it holds up. I mean, as most Beatles songs do. Let's be honest, which is amazing. 60 years, or they hold up. I think
Well,
almost all of them.
that's um that's room for a whole other discussion because one of the
Right.
things that we bring up in some of the podcast shows is about music holding up and whether certain songs are dated, which doesn't even matter to me when I judge music. Because I
Mm.
do think a lot of the early Beatles stuff, as much as I love it, you can look at as being dated. I mean, She Loves You doesn't sound like anything that's coming out today, and yet I love
Mm.
it just the same. So I don't judge music with that criteria, whether or not
Mm.
it sounds like it's something that could have been put out today. And some people care about that stuff, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't really affect me. I just think, and it's probably just because of my love for the music, but
Yeah,
everything holds up to me. I don't think anything sounds 60 years old, or the theme of it is like, like in comedy, there's outdated.
yeah,
There's things you can't say. There's things I can't say anymore that I
right,
said 10 years ago. It just doesn't work today.
right,
Whereas music, though, they were able to, and their songs are all evergreen, and like there's nothing in their song, a lot of them, where they're
right,
singing about what's happening right then
right.
in 1967 something. They're just songs, so they do last. They didn't plant themselves in that date and time. So
Yeah.
yeah, and
There's
then
some people think Sergeant Pepper is, it screams 1967, you know?
hmm,
It doesn't sound as contemporary as, say, well, now Revolver does.
yeah,
It goes in phases, there's trends all the time in music. And I try
right,
not to let my musical opinions be affected by trends. A
right.
song's either good or it's not, you know.
Yeah, and it among Beatle fans, it is funny how that Revolver now is where Pepper was in everybody's, or in people's minds
Right.
10 years ago or whatever. Now Revolver is their greatest. the greatest album. But okay.
And then look into the future 10 years from now and let's see what people will be saying.
It'll be please, please me. I mean, really, everything, it just changes and shifts, but that's again the genius of them. You can do that in 10 years. You might have a different favorite album, whereas most bands, you're not talking about them 70 years later or something. So, and then my last one I gave away earlier, but I think Now and Then has moved up to my top.
Please tell us why.
Well, it has a lot of meaning to me. My sister passed away last year, and she was a massive Beatle fan and was aware of the record coming out. Didn't live to see it. So when it came out, it was very, very emotional. And the lyrics, again, like out the blue, they mean something to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now and Then I Miss You. Well, obvious. But it's all because of you. When I started in comedy, it was so hard. You're working, no one's coming to the show, you're bombing. But I was always on the East Coast. And she would be there. She showed up. She'd bring friends.
Right.
She'd be like, "Hey, you're killing it." I'm like, "I just bombed." But she was so supportive. I don't think I would have continued without her. So when I hear that, it's all because of you. Well, that's it. My whole life is because of her. And then Now and Then I Miss You. So if you put those together,
right,
I can hardly, really I can't listen to it much. It's that, emotional.
You're too close to it right now, but maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see the video and I'm like, just the enjoyment of that video that she would have had for that, that whole I mean, forget it. She would have loved it. And then the time she passed, and then the song came out about 6 weeks later. So, so it has a lot going on there for me.
Did you hear about the woman who was in the orchestra for that song?
I did.
And she was a big Beatle fan, and she passed away before the record came out, and she was never told this was for the Beatles, that she would have known she was on a Beatles recording.
Can you imagine? Yeah. Yeah, they didn't tell them what it was just Paul, some piece of music from McCartney, and then she's on a Beatle record. As a huge Beatle fan. Yeah, that was crazy.
I know.
But yeah.
I think we're so fortunate that Paul pushed to have that third song done. I was really concerned. My main concern about the whole thing was that I had heard that George wasn't that happy with the song, and Paul's always the one saying that the Beatles are a diplomacy, and unless all of them agreed to it, nothing would happen. But Olivia has said the opposite, that she did like the song. That George didn't like the quality of John's recording, because at the time,
right,
it was that loud buzz that was played throughout it. So, but you can tell a lot of love was put into that recording, and especially the guitar solo that Paul did, trying to emulate
amazing
style.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it chills.
So it's beautiful. And yeah, I even enjoyed the demo. I liked it as a demo at the time. I liked the song. They changed it, of course. They cut out, the metal part. But yeah, I remember reading that George, like, that was, I guess they were doing Real Love and Free as a Bird. And he was like, somebody said comment, like, what are we just gonna make money off old John Lennon garbage or something like that? And he was like, enough. I'll do these two, but this no.
Yeah.
But it's great. McCartney keeps it, and then technology catches up with, and he's alive for it, and can give the tape to Peter Jackson, and
right.
It really worked out. Everything works with the Beatles. It's always amazing. Like, everything works somehow.
And Sean actually was able to find, because the demo that John made that was always out there as a bootleg was not like the original tape. So there was more generation loss and all that. So Sean had a better quality tape that he sent to Peter Jackson to work with. So, and then once he isolated John's vocals, it was right there in the
Oh,
clear.
yeah.
So,
Amazing. What would your next, because there's always those rumors, Peter Jackson, like what would you like to see or hear go through the Mal machine and come out?
well, a lot depends upon what you can do. We spoke to Peter Jackson a couple of times on the podcast show, Things We Said Today. I don't know if you,
Yeah. So yeah.
but he was explaining a lot of it has to do with, like, if it's a concert and this is an audience tape and what if you're hundreds of feet away from the Beatles, but you can still hear the performance? Can you really separate the four of them and what they're playing? A lot of it depends on the technology, and I think a lot of it has to do with how close you are to the recording. And some recordings you can't do anything with, but if you can find some of these audience tapes that are out there where you can isolate the instrumentation and it can sound really clear and you can tone down the screaming from the audience. Although as
Hmm.
you get into 66, there was less of that. You could hear the band
Right.
better.
Yeah.
Um, if you could do something with some of those concerts, fine. That's one thing that we're sorely lacking in the Beatles catalog is live material. And that
Hmm.
also accounts for a lot of their video stuff that's out there, like you said, Shea Stadium,
Hmm.
a lot of their TV performances, um, which are already on YouTube. They sound great just as they are, but they can make them sound even better.
Oh, hell yeah. Just
All the
and
stuff,
and
Shindig,
then those Stark Club tapes. I mean, I don't know what he could if that would change, but they're not horrible now. They're not
right?
horrible. So if you put them through that and really enhance, seems like that could be, doable. I would think, and that would be great. That would just be amazing to hear.
Once Peter started to explain what his software did, my mind raced to all this stuff. And my first thought was the Star Club initially. And we had asked him about that. And he said,
Oh,
ultimately it's Apple that has to decide whether or not it's going to go out anyway, because if they're not happy with the performance, it's not going to go out. Um,
right.
and the whole history of what happened there with George taking um, the guy that recorded it to court. And George thought it was horrible back then. It's been since
Hmm.
improved, but
Yeah.
you can really isolate everything, the vocals, the guitars, the drums, the bass.
Yeah.
It's pretty darn good.
It it's doable. Yeah. I remember having the album live at the Star Club. Remember they released it?
Yeah, I
Some
have it on link.
I don't remember who. Yeah, and it was okay, but I've heard clips or songs on YouTube where people have cleaned it up. I mean, it's much better. It's
Mm,
pretty good.
yeah.
So then, you're thinking, well, if Peter Jackson could get his hands on this, we could really have something here. But I agree, live, they are lacking in live concerts, live.
Right.
What could be done. But
Like you said, Budokan, that's been
yeah,
out.
and that's a good concert, and they're not screaming. They're very quiet. The crowd.
Yeah. I
They're
know
really not. They're
Ringo
not
was
loud.
happy with their performance, but maybe they didn't have their hearts in it by then.
Maybe, but there's weird how YouTube. There's all these clips pop up every week. There's more. You'll see a live clip. I'm like, where'd that come from? And
Right.
it's Cincinnati '66, and you go, what? And it's pretty good quality. They're singing "Nowhere Man," and you go, let's get this going here. Let's
Yeah.
give me. I want to see this. Stream it with some good sound.
Stuff like the Royal Variety performance, the sound quality on that is great. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Big Night Out,
Oh yeah,
that's fantastic.
yeah.
You know,
You're right.
all in one
Yeah,
big DVD Blu-ray package. You
let's
know,
go. Come on. I know.
why not
But
make money on it? You know, well, I just don't know about the copywriting and all that, what they have to do. But yeah, there's
yeah,
there's
yeah.
there's a treasure trove of stuff that still can come out. You could also take a lot of stuff that's only been released in mono, like the
Right,
Dead Audition recordings, which had people have played around with that and made stereo recordings of that.
right.
Have
Yeah.
an official one come out.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's just amazing though that like I was saying, for these newer, younger Beatle fans, I mean, this is like what a time. Other than being alive in '60s, this is the
Hmm.
best time to be alive as a Beatle fan. I mean, things are just every day they're coming out, or there's rumors, or there's a movie. You know, like what do you think of that movie with the four stories and coming out?
I don't
Are
know
you
if,
into that, or
oh
you're
yeah,
happy?
I'm going to be very curious. I think it's insane that there's going to be four separate movies, each from the perspective of each Beatle, which is a great idea. But to put each one separately in a theater, how many
Yeah,
people are going to run out and say, "I want to see the Ringo one"? You know,
right.
it's I'd want to see all
Yeah,
four of them. And are they going to space it out each one?
right.
Don't know.
I didn't understand. I'm not really understanding the concept. I mean, is it going to be a 2 hour movie, just John joining the Beatles, growing up, and and then you go to another movie and you see Paul, and
Right.
or is it going to be 30 minutes of each story? Then you have the hour. I mean, 2 hours, and then combine them, or so, at the end they're all joining up finally. And I don't, because it doesn't make sense unless it's just streaming. Unless there's no movie, you just stream it, and you can watch all four parts.
And just this last week, they came out with the rumor of who's going to be playing each Beatle. So, like you said, are you going to have all four of them in each of these four movies, or are you going to have,
Yeah.
because you got to have, if you're going to have people playing the Beatles, if you got John telling his version, you got to have the other actors playing the other Beatles as he's telling the story.
Mm-hmm.
But I would think, I interpret it as though there'll be, this one is from John's perspective, telling you how he felt at this time throughout the whole Beatle years. The other one's on Paul, another one's on George, and another one's on Ringo. That's how I'm looking at it. We'll probably find out more as
Yeah.
time goes on here, because they're saying it probably will come out in 2027. But
Yeah.
just before we started doing this, we were talking about, I wanted to know, since I hadn't spoken to you in so long, if you're as big a Beatle fan now as you were when I first knew you, and you said even more.
Yeah. Yeah. Because of, I think it is because of whether it's YouTube or, the books that are out now. And it's just, it's very easy to keep it going. What I mean? So I found myself just, I never really waned at all. I think I've changed a bit when I was at college with you and everything. Was Lennon, I was all Lennon, and
Hmm.
McCartney was, I didn't care for a lot of his stuff solo, and George, but now I've I mean, I'm still Lennon, but my respect for George and Paul, Ringo too, but really McCartney, I've, delved into a lot,
Hmm.
and it's ridiculous. It's terrible, you know, and the fact that he's still doing it and making music and making good music at this
Yeah.
point, and touring, and it's I saw him in DC. I don't know if you saw that video. I have a video I post every now and my sister and I were at the McCartney DC concert,
Hmm.
and she was in a wheelchair, so she'd get front row. They put the wheelchair in the front, and then she called me and she said, "Do you want to see McCartney?" And I was like, "I've seen him a few times. I don't know. Go to DC." And she's like, "Front row, front row." I was like, "Hell yeah, let's go."
Oh, so that's what
So
persuaded.
yeah, yeah. So I'm in the front row, and then my niece said, "You should bring a sign because you read signs." And so I'm like, "All right." I was never that guy to hold up a sign, but I figured, well, I'm right in the front. So what would the sign be? What can we write? You know what I mean? So about a year, maybe a little less than a year before that, my sister was in a coma. I mean, this poor kid, but she was in a coma and it lasted about 11 days. And by day 10, the doctors didn't know why she wasn't waiting. No one knew. And I was there every day, spending the day all day. So at one point, I was like, I'm going to go get some coffee. I put earbuds in her ear and I put on Band on the Run, just the whole album.
Uh-huh.
And she woke up a few hours later, and all she knew was Band on, like, she was like, Band on the Run. Like, she heard Band on the Run the whole.
Right.
So when we were getting ready to go to the concert, my niece said, "You should make a sign that says Band on the Run woke me from a coma." And I was like, "That's pretty good. Like, you're not going to see it. He doesn't see that.
Yeah.
He's never seen that before." So I'm in the front, and they first. So then, actually, we go to lunch before the
Yeah.
concert, and I saw what's the guitar player? Not
Rusty.
Rusty, the other one,
Um,
Brian.
Brian.
Brian. So he was on Instagram. So I wrote on Instagram, "Hey, we're having lunch, and we're gonna be in the front row. I got this sign. Um, Band on the Run woke me from a coma," and he hit like on it. And then during the concert, they're doing, I think it's like "Let Me Roll It," and they're next to each other, Paul and Brian. And Brian, you can see him. He's talking, and I have this on video. He's talking to Paul and points. He's like saying, "That's the guy with the sign that I
Yeah.
saw." So they look and they nod at my sister and I. And then I'm like, "Oh, he saw it. He saw it. We're good." And then when he did the sign thing, he said, "Here's one." He goes, "I don't know if this is true or not, but Band on the Run woke me from a coma. Is that true?" And I'm like, "Holy, I'm talking to McCartney here." So I'm like, "Yeah, man." And he goes, "Yeah, man." He repeats it. And then he sees my sister and he starts tapping his heart and he's looking at her. And then he, she was crying and he was looking at her. It was great. It was just unbelievable. And then he went into a song, and I sat down and she's weeping. And I was like, "Did that just happen?" Like this whole thing was like a weird blur. And
Uh-huh.
she was like, "Yes, you just spoke to Paul." And at the end of the concert, we were in the front. All these people started coming up to us because they wanted to know, "Is that true? What happened? How are you?
Yeah.
Are you everything okay?" It was great. It was just this great moment that I'm so happy, she got to have, and we both got to have with a little interaction with Paul. So
That's
I'll
amazing.
send you the clip. I'll send you the clip.
Was she fully aware of what was going on during this concert, or, after she was
100%.
in the coma, she was
Oh,
totally fine?
totally fine. Totally fine. She was in really the coma was she was in Florida visiting, and she had a pump that shot morphine onto a tumor, and it
Uh-huh.
had broken. So she was in so much pain from the tumor, and she was going through morphine withdrawal.
Yeah.
So this is my sister, how funny she was. She's in the emergency room in the worst pain in the world, screaming, crying, and she's writing to me the lyrics of Cold Turkey. She's texting me. She's like screaming. She's like, "Temperature rising, fever." I'm like, "Really?" But that's how she was.
That's what gets you
Um,
through it sometimes.
that exactly, yeah. But yeah, it was such a amazingly. We talked about it, until obviously she passed. That was just one of the highlights for her and me. I mean,
I'm
it was
glad you got
crazy.
to see that. And I'm
Yeah,
glad that
yeah,
Paul, you never know what effect your music has on people sometimes. And
yeah.
that's to the extreme. You know?
Well, even he said, "I don't know if this is true or not," but
Yeah.
Band on the Run. He goes, "Okay,"
Uh,
and it was great. It was just great. So
oh,
yeah,
that's a great story.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we were talking about how there's so much now on the internet and so much on YouTube, and you could spend the whole day just watching stuff on the Beatles easily. You could spend the rest of your life on YouTube if you want to. And
yeah.
it in some ways it's a good thing, but I also miss the days having the radio background that I've had when it was something special, when a Beatles show would come on the radio and you wouldn't know what songs you were going to hear, and now you can
Sure.
program whatever songs you want, you know.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I
and
miss it a little. That kind of thing.
yeah, the book
Yeah.
situation, I know what you're talking about because the books that have come out in the last 10, 20 years have been either a subject where they really delve deep into something. Like there's a book that Chuck Gunderson put out called Some Fun Tonight, and it's all about all the Beatle concerts in America. But every fact you can come up with about every single show and all the venues, where the Beatles stayed, what they wore,
Mm.
what the attendance
And
was at each show, and it's incredible. And now that
yeah.
one of my colleagues, Ken Womack, put out a book on Mal
Hmm.
Evans,
Yeah.
which
Great book.
yeah, you read it?
Yeah.
Okay. And he's going to have
Yeah.
another book which has got all of his diaries and personal, artifacts and stuff like that um, in the book. And
Mm.
it never ends. There was a book that came out years ago on Jimmy Nickel. how much can you say about Jimmy Niff?
Wow.
He was a Beatle for less than 2 weeks, but it's everything
Yeah.
else in his lifetime. But people are
Wow, it's
finding
amazing.
things that are new to write about.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I wish it was that way before. Because I'm like we were saying, when I was, in the '80s or whatever, it was like there were 3 books. I remember having a couple of books,
Uh-huh.
and they seemed kind of the same, and there were 8 pictures, and then every now and then some guy would have a videotape of a bootleg, a concert from DC or something, and
Yeah.
bad quality VHS. And so it was really, you really had to look. You had to make an effort in those days to be a real fan. The
Right.
Beatle Fest too, which that was great in the beginning. Go to those, that was fun. But now, I mean, I like cigars. I'll have a cigar. I'll have YouTube, and I'll just watch YouTube for 2 hours
Yeah.
and just watch concerts, interviews, all these things that I've never saw. You know, and it's amazing. Or one of your pods, or just it's so much. It's just endless Beatles stuff
Right.
if you want it, and you know I'm here for it.
Yeah. I need
It's
48
good.
hours in a day, actually.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how many pods are you doing now?
Well, I've
How many
got
podcasts do
We
you
Spent
have?
Today and Talk More Talk, a solo Beatles videocast, and then there's this channel. I guess you'd call this a podcast if you want to. And
Right.
then I have my radio show, Every Little Thing, which is on something like 50 radio stations. But you can't, there's only one place where it's archived where you can listen to it at any time. That's at WFDU's radio station. Um, so it keeps me busy, all these different shows. And then I have my website. I don't really do too much on the website other than have trivia every couple of
Mhm.
weeks where you can win great prizes. Um, and I have a lot of older interviews that are strictly audio interviews on the website. That's at
Okay.
kenmichaelsradio.com. Um, so I don't know yet what I'm going to do with the website, if I'm going to update it, give it a brand new look, or maybe cut back on my workload. I'm not quite sure because
Mm.
all this stuff is time consuming, but it's so
Sure.
much fun.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah. Yeah.
enjoy it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
tell us about this life of yours as a stand-up comedian, how it all started, because when I knew you, I saw no signs of that.
No.
Not that you weren't funny. I'm just
No,
saying
but
I
no
had
one
no
did.
idea that you wanted to do that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. I always loved it. I didn't know what to do. I thought I wanted to be a DJ. That's why I went to NYT, and
Right.
I thought that would be what I would do, because I didn't see myself as a performer in front of people, but I did want to talk and play music. And so I did that. But then I left and I joined the Navy. I left New York Tech. I joined the Navy out of the blue. I don't, you look back and go, I don't know what I was thinking, but I wanted to get away, I guess. And I was stationed in Norfolk, and they had a bar, and it had open mic night. And there were like 3 comedians. And we would go, my friends and I, and watch. And I was like, I could do that. I want to try that. So I, drank a lot of beer and went up there, but something about it, I was like, I'm going to come back. So without friends. So I
Uh-huh.
came back the next Tuesday, and I did it 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And I started coming back every Tuesday. And then I got out of the Navy 4 years. And the owner of the local comedy club said, would you want to be the MC here? Every weekend you could.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, that'd be great. So all these New York comics would come down. I got to meet them, talk with them, and I was like really into it now. And then I moved back to New York, back to Long Island, lived on Long Island doing comedy, and then moved into the city, did comedy, and just it's been comedy ever since. I've made a living at it for since 1990.
Is it
Um,
is it easy for you to come up with material?
Not really. I find it harder now. I don't know if it's because I'm older, or I don't know, but I can do it. It's just where years ago I would literally think of something and then kind of bring it to the stage and have it sort of flesh it out,
Yeah.
and now it's more I'm writing it down and I'm trying to figure it out, because on stage it's not coming to me the way it did as easily,
Uh-huh.
and I'm doing better. Like I'm on a lot of cruises, and I'm on the biggest ship in the world, at the newest ship, and it's really there's no leeway to work out material.
Yeah.
You got to go up and kill. You know what I mean? They're not letting me. it's not open mic night. So,
Uh-huh.
and I don't have a lot of chance to do an open mic night anymore. So those kind of things, it's hard to get new material into the act because every show is a real show.
Right.
You know what I mean? When you're starting, you're at open mic nights. You can do new stuff all the time. Doesn't matter. Or you're emceeing. You could throw some new jokes out. It's not your show. Doesn't really matter. But here, I gotta bring it. And so I'll do maybe a line or two in the middle of stuff, kind of
Uh-huh.
throw it in there and hear if it works, and then I'll continue it. And if it doesn't work, at least I can just move on. But yeah, I've been doing it since 90 and done great. It's been, I have no complaints. It's been great. And it's kind of like I didn't realize it was really what I wanted to do the whole time. But then I look back when I was like 15, I was writing sketches, sending it to Saturday Night Live. They were
Really?
sending it back going, we can't open this.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I look back, it was definitely comedy, oriented. And turned out I was able to knock on wood, make a living.
So working on the ship, you're currently doing that?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's
Yeah.
steady work.
Yeah, I got a contract with them for this year. So 2024 was the icon of the seas on Royal Caribbean. So
Wow.
I do shows, I leave, I come back, but and it's out of Florida. I'm living in Florida, so there's no flying. It's like the first year of my life, I don't have to go to the airport. I drive to the ship. I
Uh-huh.
mean, it's for a comic, that's unbelievable. Any comic or person listening to this, they wouldn't believe it. I mean, nobody believes it. I don't have to go to the airport for a year. It's phenomenal because, I mean, I was living in airports for 25 years.
Wow.
And now to not go, I was like, oh my God, it's the best. So yeah, it's
So,
been
are you
good.
on cruises? Do you go to different locations or you stay in one
Yeah,
location?
no, I'm on the cruise. We get on the cruise Saturday and we cruise the Eastern Caribbean. Then the next week we do the Western, and then I go home. And then
Yeah.
2 weeks later I come back and we do it again. Just Groundhog Day and different crowds, but everything else is the same, pretty
That's
much.
life. That's great.
And in my off time, it's a lot of Beatles, a lot of, it's been really,
Is
and
it
which I
tough now? I
enjoyed.
just wanted to ask, is it tough for someone trying to break into comedy? Because I remember growing up and I would discover the great comedians of that time would be on late night television, Johnny Carson, you know, Jay Leno, whatever, and they would have time,
Right.
doing their bits. And now you don't really see that anymore. You have to
Yeah.
hope that there'll be a show on cable television where you have a whole bunch of stand-up comedians in one show. So there isn't
Yeah.
that much exposure the way I see it, unless it's all on YouTube now.
Well,
How do
it's different. It's flipped. Like if I was to get an offer right now, this just shows you how it's flipped. And they said I could be on the Tonight Show tomorrow night,
yeah,
or I could be on Joe Rogan's podcast. I'm going on Rogan.
really?
So that tells you everything. That's just the way it is. Nobody watches the Tonight Show. Nobody's watching the Tonight like in that way. You
Uh-huh.
know, kids don't. I mean, young people they watch clips. They'll see a moment or two of, but they're not watching it. Those shows don't break anybody. But one appearance on Rogan, life's different.
Mm,
It just changes. So that's the big difference. So it's not really the goal. It used to be you go to LA, do 10 minutes, you get a deal, then you get a sitcom.
yeah,
And those it's gone. That doesn't happen anymore. There's no deals, there's no sitcoms, there's nothing. It's you got to make your own stuff,
right.
and that's what people are doing, whether it's podcasts or videos. I did a special, there's an open bar comedy. It's a thing, and I shot a special for that, and it's coming out on YouTube. And it's like 10 years ago, I'd be like, YouTube, come on. But now you got top comedians filming stuff and putting it on YouTube
Mm,
because it's free and you get the eyes. You get people, as you know, you get people to watch and listen, and these paywalls don't always work. Open bars started a couple of years ago and they were charging like $50 for the year, access to all their specials.
right.
And they realized people aren't paying. But if you put it on YouTube, you can get enough viewers and you can advertise. And, so that's really the way to go for a lot of things.
All right.
So yeah,
Are
but
there any comedians that were heroes for you? You know, the ones that you really looked up to the most?
yeah, when I started, I mean, I'd watch Carlin it's something every year he had a special out, all
Yeah.
new material, and I loved Pryor, the Mount Rushmore guys. And then there's a few guys like people I haven't heard of that I had met on the road who were just brilliant, but for whatever reason
Hmm.
didn't break, never got known. And in those days too, it was harder. I mean, the '90s and 2000s, you were at a club in Michigan. That was it. You were in a club in Michigan.
Right.
Now you'd film it, you'd put it on YouTube, you'd post about it, put it on Instagram, you know what I mean? TikTok.
Yeah.
Then it was just, all right, I did 3 nights in Michigan. And that's it. It's over. Nobody cares. So it's a whole different world. But I think it's better now in a way because there are those gatekeepers are gone. And it's like if you're funny and you want it and you want to work, you can get it. You can just throw enough stuff there on YouTube and TikTok. And if it's good, you'll get found. You'll get noticed. It may not be a star, but you'll sell tickets. And that's the game, selling tickets, you know?
There's a similarity here with radio. You know,
Mm-hmm.
for years and years, I did my live Beatles show on a local radio station, and that was it. It was only heard there. And
Mm-hmm.
now everything I do can be heard or watched worldwide, so
Right. It's, but do you like that better? I mean, is that something you think the days are better, or do you look back fondly and thinking it was better in the '80s or '90s,
tough to say.
2000?
Because I was given an opportunity at the radio station that I did my Beatles show at for 10 years in New Jersey, WDHA. They gave me total freedom practically to do whatever I wanted to do, except play Yoko.
Oh, these
So,
Philistines.
um, and that was only at
There
the
you go.
beginning. But I mean, I did so many things on that station. I had all kinds of different games and trivia and thematic sets, and I played anything that the Beatles were ever slightly involved in, and it worked. And part of the reason why it worked is that specialty programs they'd usually put on the weekends when you have the lowest ratings, just to spruce up the ratings. So
Right.
they have something else to plug during the week, and maybe some Beatle fans will find out about my show. They'll find out about the station through my show, and then they'll get hooked on the programming the rest of the week. So that's
Mm-hmm.
how it was back then. But on commercial radio, there's very little creativity,
Oh yeah.
the non-commercial
Yeah.
stations, whether it's public radio or college stations or internet radio, that I think is really very interesting. There's a lot of things you can do on the radio that you can't do with a video, and you also have to know your audience. You have to know if they have enough patience to sit through a 1 hour or 2 hour video. Sometimes a 5 minute video works better, and you'll get more people watching.
Oh yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but you have the chance to observe that on your own, which is fascinating. Says it right there on YouTube how many people have watched. You know.
Right. Right. It's
Uh,
great. When I was in the Navy getting out, I was doing comedy just on the weekends, and I got hired at a radio station in Chesapeake, Virginia,
yeah.
WOFM. And it was great. And I did the overnights, and then I got promoted to 10 to 2. And
Right.
I'm like, this is a great spot. I love it. But I was working the weekend in comedy. I was making more on the weekend than I was for the whole week on radio. I
Right.
was driving 30 minutes back. So then I got to a point, I talked to the program director and I said, I think I'm going to have to leave. And he's like, why? And I told him, and I go, unless you guys can match that and he's like, we can't.
Uh-huh.
And it was nothing. I mean, the money I was emceeing at a club, it was nothing, but there was no money. I mean,
Right.
literally, even though I loved it, I just couldn't continue it. But I was playing so much Beatles. And then I would get notes all the time. The program director's like, this is not your home stereo. We have listeners who don't like don't want to hear this. I'm like, all right. But I loved it at the time, it was so much fun.
Mm.
But I just couldn't get over the money, But it was a bunch of old hippies in a house. The radio station was like in a house,
Uh-huh.
and it was great, But they weren't making any money. They weren't giving out any money, so I had to move on.
I've been there too. The
Mm-hmm.
salaries that you have in especially small market radio is just it's a joke.
Yeah, completely. completely. Yeah. So I was like, I'm going to leave this to go do stand up on weekends and make more money. But, you know, looking back, it was good. It was a good move, but I did enjoy it. I did have fun with it.
Yeah. See, I would only go
Mm.
back to full time on the radio if I was secure enough and didn't need the money, if it was just something extra that I was doing. Uh,
Right.
yeah, just as
Yeah.
fun, just for fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Now all these guys are doing their own radio shows. I mean, YouTube, there's a million radio shows and guys filming himself in his basement, you know,
mm,
DJing.
I don't know how
Okay.
fascinating that would be if I did
It's not
that.
it's not great because the song's playing and you got a camera on the guy just kind of okay, waiting for the song to end, you know.
Play air guitar, or they could mouth to the words, or
Yeah, at least when we did it, there were things you had to do. You get a record ready, or
yeah.
some carts or whatever. You got to write shit down, but there were things to do. Now, what is there to do? I mean, you just listen to the song and wait for it to end, and then go and talk and say what it was.
Uh,
So, but
Tell us about this podcast that you've been a part of.
Al Ducharme, a comedian out of L.A. He's the voice on. He does a voice on Bill Burr's animated show, F is for Family on Netflix.
Uh-huh.
He's a comedian friend of mine, and we did a web series called The Two Dicks, and it was about cops in the 50s. Detectives were referred to as dicks.
Uh-huh.
So we were the two dicks, and we were these two 1950s detectives, and it was a comedy. It ran 2 seasons, and then COVID hit, and we had a nice following, and then COVID, and we're like, he's in LA, I'm in Florida, so couldn't do anything. But we had a little bit of an audience, and we were like, we got to do something. So we started a podcast, and we've been doing that now for 4 years, and it's 2 Al's, 1 pod, and we do a new one every Monday, and
Uh-huh.
we run a classic on Friday because we have about 260 episodes.
Uh-huh.
So every Friday we run an oldie, and then Monday we have a new one every Monday, and it's available everywhere. And we got a Patreon, that's patreon.com/1pod, and it's been good. It's been you sort of have to have that now. You got to have where it used to be. I remember I'd come off stage and people would be like, "What's your website?" And now now it's what's your podcast?
Uh-huh.
Like if you don't have a podcast, you're not in the mix in it. So I'm glad we have it, and it's good to get a lot of people from the ship. They'll, because they announce it before I go on, and then people will listen to it, and so it's working out. It's nice.
Okay. So what exactly do you cover in each episode?
Well, it's more. We talk about the gig we had last week.
Uh-huh.
Where were you? What happened? So there's a lot of so we get listeners who love cruising because we do a lot of talk about cruise ships.
Uh-huh.
So they're not there maybe for the comedy so much as just they want to hear about, because we tell a lot of secrets of cruising and talk about it. So it's a lot of cruise talk, comedy, and then whatever's in the news. We might talk about, kind of riff on that. No structure, just sort of, it's an hour with two comics,
Just very loose.
just hanging out. Yeah, yeah.
Does it get
So
very
yeah.
political?
No, we stay away from all that. It's same way with comedy. Just you talk about dividing the room. I'm not interested in dividing and losing people over
Right.
some dumb issue. I
No.
don't care.
That's one of the things that you got to be careful about. You don't know who you're going to offend sometimes. And
Yeah,
in politics, people have very extreme opinions, and
yeah,
you
and
don't know if you should just be honest about yourself because that's what's real,
mhm.
or do you want to be careful?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we do any. I'm not high because I'm not a political guy to begin with. Anyway, I know who I like and don't like, say, but I don't bring it on stage. I don't bring it in a podcast. I'm not nuts about it. Where people now, or if you write a comment, people they make it political somehow.
Uh-huh.
You go, I didn't mean that. That's not political.
Mhm.
So I mean, I don't mind offending someone if it's based on comedy, or maybe I don't know. Like I might say I did a joke about a guy got hurt in a motorcycle accident, whatever. And then somebody got hurt in the motorcycle. You know what I mean? They're like, I didn't like that. I don't care because I didn't go in to be mean.
Right.
I didn't write it for that. Whereas politics, I feel like some guys are writing the material to get the audience, half pissed off and half not or whatever. And
Right.
I'm just not, I don't care. I mean, people are on a cruise for a vacation. It's just be funny and get out of there. I'm not making a point. I'm not going to change anybody's mind,
Mm.
and I don't really care. I don't care what you or anyone vote or do. I don't care. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Let me
I
ask
never
you
get wrapped
something.
up in that.
Yeah, there's I'm going to kind of relate this to how music has changed because of how the industry's changed. There used to be a time when in radio you had a selection of a few radio stations locally for you to pick from. And because of that, audiences were bigger. And therefore the artists who were featured on those stations had bigger audiences and had a bigger impact. There was a time when you had giants in the comedy world, like it's not that long ago, like a Jerry Seinfeld or Rodney Dangerfield or Steve Martin or people like that. Because of the podcast world growing so much and comedians kind of moving away from television somewhat, do you see there being a time when there'll ever be giants like there used to be who could have as strong an impact, or will there be a lot of very successful comedians out there that may not make as big an impact?
Yeah, I think the latter on that, because there are guys right now doing arenas that you don't know,
Hmm.
you personally never heard of,
Right.
and they're selling 25,000 tickets, and they're adding a show. So the tweets at Madison Square Garden or Philly, the Wells Fargo Arena,
Okay.
but you don't know. The average person might not know them, but the comedy fan knows them.
Right.
And they're so that way. I think there might be one or two that could break through, but there really aren't movies like that anymore. Like Eddie Murphy broke with 48 hours.
Right.
There aren't things like that anymore. We don't have the big comedy with the guy. So the idea of that being that biggest star, probably not. But there are guys, I mean, who are just they're making millions and killing it, and their podcasts are massive. But it also becomes, in a way, a little bit like, remember YouTube stars 10 years ago? And it was like, what do you do? They're on YouTube and they're famous. And
Uh-huh.
that's kind of becoming away with comedy. The comedians, their podcasts are so big that they sell out a club, not a theater arena, but a club. They
Uh-huh.
can sell it out. And the fans go. And it's almost like the comedy's incidental. They want to just be there and see these guys they've listened to
Right.
and get
Mhm.
but podcasting. But to answer your question, no, I don't think there would really be a Steve Martin type success now, and because they just don't have you don't have those movies being made,
Mhm.
and you're not going to be on Johnny Carson, Lemon.
Okay. Al, you're actually freezing up here. So we're gonna have to end the conversation. Hopefully you'll come back in the next few seconds. Here you go.
I'm
But
back.
I want to thank you so much for being here on the channel with us, and keep me informed about the YouTube special. Do you have the date for it?
I believe it's July 10th.
Okay,
July
July
10th
10th.
on
And
YouTube, and I will. And this was great. Like I said, I'm a big fan of the shows. I listen in all the time. I watch, and it was great to be on.
okay, it's great talking to you. And next time it's not going to be 41 years. Do you
We can
ever
guarantee that.
do you ever do just your own shows in New York anymore, or is everything just on the ship?
Not really. I haven't been in a few years. The clubs I do, I tend to just keep it rather local.
Okay.
Traveling is, all that. But I'll let you know. if I'm on Long Island. Maybe one of the clubs there or something
Okay.
could happen. Yeah.
If I'm in Florida, I'll let you know.
Okay. Sounds good.
So
And
we'll
I'll
have
get
to
you.
make an
I got to
appointment.
get you that tape. I'm gonna find that tape and get it to you.
That'll be interesting. I can't wait to hear that.
Oh yeah,
Thank you
it's
so
interesting.
much. And rocking the island, WNYT, Old Westbury. Thanks, Al, and thanks to
Thank
all of
you.
you for watching. And we'll see you next time.